Hello from a windy and rainy Liberia here today, and thank you so much for joining me for another thought from the Bible. We continue to look through the life of Elisha and the miracles that happened in and around his story in 2 Kings in the Bible. If you've missed any of the videos before, don't worry, all of these are standalone, but you can catch up if you want to. I'll put a link to the playlist with all of the videos in this series in the description below. But this next little section of the story of the life of Elisha is one of my favorite stories in the whole Bible. It's got everything. It's got tension, it's got armies, it's got angels, it's got a very real threat and the overwhelming wonder of our great God. So in 2 Kings chapter 6, we find the prophet Elisha and his servant living in a town called Dothan, about 10 miles away from Israel's capital city of Samaria. And Israel at the time is having some issues with another neighboring nation, Aram, which is sending out bands of raiders onto the border towns of Israel, and it's taking Israel's food and goods, basically being a nuisance to the nation of Israel. However, also at that time, Elisha repeatedly tells Israel's king, Joram, where to go and where to avoid when the Arameans were raiding. Now this understandably enraged the king of Aram, and he summoned his officers and demanded of them, "Tell me, which of us is on the side of the king of Israel?" "None of us, my lord the king," said one of his officers. "But Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the very words you speak in your bedroom." Absolutely nothing is hidden from God. So accurate was the information that Elisha had passed on to the king of Israel that the Aramean king was absolutely convinced that there must be like a spy or a mole working in his very court and reporting back to his enemies. In reality, Elisha was receiving that information from God. That is amazing. Even if this story ended right here and nothing else happened, that by itself is incredible. Elisha was so receptive to the voice of God, so convinced that what God told him was the truth, that he was willing to pass that information on. And I think for us sometimes it can be hard enough to take a little bit of time to listen to what God may be saying to us. This world is so fast-paced these days, it's so busy, there's so much that demands our attention all of the time, that it can be hard to find those moments simply to stop and to listen to what God has to say to us. Well, anyway, the king of Aram decides it's time to take Elisha out. He is going to try and capture this prophet who is causing him so many problems. So he sent horses and chariots and a strong force there to Dothan. They went by night and surrounded the city. And when the servant of the man of God got up and went out early the next morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. "Oh no, my lord, what shall we do?" the servant asked. I love that reaction, because isn't that exactly the reaction that most of us would have? They were literally surrounded by what the Bible describes as a strong force. They were surrounded by horses and chariots. They couldn't make a run for it. They would be caught in no time. There was no way out. And yet Elisha answers his servant and says, "Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And Elisha prayed, "Open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see." Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. That is incredible. What an amazing moment that must have been for that servant. This force that seemed completely overwhelming seconds ago was made insignificant. It was completely dwarfed by the reality of the hosts of heaven which surrounded them right at that moment. I can just imagine his jaw dropping as he looked around and realized the force of the angel armies of God that was on their side. But what I've always wondered as I've read through this story is, did Elisha already see this? Did he walk around every day seeing angelic forces at every moment, like giving him a nod, to maybe a familiar angel? Hey, how are you doing? We're not actually told. We're not told that Elisha could see those who were with them, not with his physical eyes. And yet, he was absolutely, completely, 100% assured of the fact that those who were with them were more than those who were with the Arameans. Whether he saw it with his physical eyes or not, he knew that there was greater strength surrounding him than the visible reality that he could see before him, that army of Aram. What an important realization that is for us. How crucial it is that we learn this lesson too. Whether we physically see angels around us or not, whether we physically see God's hand at work in our situations or not, we can trust absolutely, completely, 100% that there is no power and no ruler and no authority and no spiritual force of evil that can ever conquer our great God. Nothing even comes close, and you can walk around all day, every day, secure in that knowledge, with knowing with absolute certainty that the one who is with me is greater than anything else that I might face in this world. That is important information for us to remember. When Philippians chapter 4 and verse 6 tells us, do not be anxious about anything, we can do that, we can achieve that in light of this revelation. We never need to be anxious. We never need to worry, because God is with us. Because we are surrounded by angelic armies. Because in every single situation we can bring our requests, we can bring our prayers and our petitions with thanksgiving to our great God, knowing that He is in total control. So often we're waiting for the miracle. We're looking out at that army, or whatever the equivalent is in our lives, at that situation that feels so overwhelming. And we're expecting a lightning bolt to fall from the sky to deal with it in an instant, so it's gone and we don't have to worry about it ever again. But we need to open our eyes and see the victory that is already won for us. God's provision and protection, which is already ours. We can see the unseen in our lives, trusting God with us, trusting Emmanuel in any battle that we face. And sometimes God will work in that way with a kind of a lightning bolt, miraculous moment. We've seen that through the life of Elisha. But sometimes we just need to be like this man of God and recognize what God has already done. It wasn't in that moment when Elisha prayed to open the servant's eyes that those armies of angelic beings appeared. They had been there all the time. And we need to remember those victories that God has already won for us. We need to remember that regardless of what situations we may face, regardless of what troubles we may have to deal with for a little while we're living on this world, our eternity is assured because Jesus won the victory on the cross, and we know that we get to spend eternity with God in heaven on the new earth, enjoying eternity with more joy and peace and wonder than we can possibly even fathom. That victory is already won. That is exciting. That is a good thing to remember and to hold on to as we go about our everyday routines here on this earth. And you know, this story, it doesn't end there. It's great. You can go and read the whole thing in 2 Kings chapter 6. I really recommend you do. It's such a good story. The Israelites have a great victory that day. Elisha prays that the army would be made blind, the opposite of his prayer for his servant. And they can't see a thing. And so they are led by the hand to the city of Samaria, where Elisha prays again that they would see, and they find themselves suddenly in the capital city of their enemies, surrounded by the army of Israel. And the king of Israel asks Elisha, should I kill them? Elisha pleads for mercy and tells the king to give them food and water, hospitality. And so, for a little while at least, the armies of Aram stop raiding the people of Israel. And they see that real victory, that end to the hostilities for a moment, not because of their military might, not because of some miraculous moment, but all because of what Elisha could see, that he could see the unseen, the victory that God had already won. I really hope that was an encouragement to you today. The victory is in God's hands, and you can see the unseen in your life. I'll be back on Wednesday next week with another thought from the Bible, another glimpse into the life of Elisha. So I will see you then.